Mental illness is terrible. I recently emerged from the darkest period of my life, and the only reason I am able to write down my memories is because of insensitive therapy mandated by the court system. I would not wish the pain and terror I experienced upon anyone, no matter how deserving they might be. You see, my insanity came on slow, yet never left, increasing day by day. Pure terror is knowing that your mind is failing you and you're absolutely powerless to do anything about it. It all began 5 years ago, shortly after my 16th birthday. I grew up the only child of a single mother. My mother had me at 18 and raised me with no help from my father. She did a damn good job, considering the circumstances. She worked 2 jobs and received no assistance from anyone. Oddly, my father's sister ended up being the only family we kept in touch with. As I got older, this Aunt Sheryl visit increased, until she came over almost every weekend. She was also a single mother. However, one of her children died at the hands of her abusive and suicidal husband, while the other child, a son, was driven insane by witnessing the abuse. My mother deeply admired Aunt Sheryl because she earned a degree in psychology while living with her abusive husband and raising 2 children. My aunt also established her own private psychology practice, the life insurance policies earned from deaths of her husband and firstborn. Shortly before my 16th birthday, Aunt Sheryl began to encourage my mother to go back to school. At 18, my mother studied nursing at the local community college, but her unexpected pregnancy forced her to drop out. Ever since then, she worked as a waitress at various restaurants around town. She worked hard and made a decent living, but I always knew that she felt unfulfilled as a career waitress. At first, my mother refused to even consider the idea. Going back to school meant she worked fewer hours, and we all knew that she could not support the both of us if she had tuition payments and worked less hours. My aunt seemed to anticipate the response and quickly offered to let me live at her place while my mother earned her degree. My mother hesitated for a moment, but still refused, saying that she had raised me for almost 16 years by herself and felt no need to change course while I was still in high school. Now, here's where I made the decision that would change the course of my life and begin my descent into hell. I sided with my aunt. I told my mother that as a 16-year-old, I'm more than capable of taking care of myself, and living with Aunt Sheryl would give me access to the best high school in the state. My chances of earning a scholarship at such a prestigious high school made this an easy decision. My aunt, with a smile I now remember as twisted, said to my mother, "Well, it's decided then. He moves in at the end of this month, just in time for the start of spring term." My mother, looking helpless, glanced at me for a moment before agreeing to the plan. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind as I packed up my belongings, helped my mum apply to nursing school, and moved into my aunt's house. My aunt picked me up from my mum's place on the day of the move and drove back to her place in the next town over. This would be my first time visiting my aunt's house, as well as the first time meeting my cousin. This never struck me as odd, since my mother didn't own a car, and therefore had no way to visit anyone outside the local bus route. Aunt Sheryl parked the car in front of a beautiful 2-story yellow home. The home seemed like something out of a magazine, with a meticulous attention to every detail. This attention to detail continued as I walked inside and was shown to my bedroom. I felt out of place in this home, but not simply because it was much nicer than where I grew up. The house smelled of bleach and disinfectant, which I attributed to my aunt cleaning up in preparation for my arrival. The first week of living with my aunt passed uneventfully, though my unease around her increased as the days passed. My attempts at engaging with my aunt on a personal level never felt right. I felt like an audience member watching a play. Every time I walked into a room, it felt like she snapped into character upon seeing me. It also struck me as odd that I could see no evidence of another person living there. In fact, I did not see my cousin for the first 2 weeks. My aunt told me that my cousin was away at a summer camp for the mentally ill. He lived in the basement of the house, which Aunt Sheryl said was because he deserved his privacy due to being 19 years old. Under no circumstances would I be allowed into the basement until we returned from summer camp. In hindsight, they should have been warning signs that something wasn't right. But at 16 years old, I was more focused on the upcoming school year at my new high school. My mother told me to trust my aunt, since she had been through a lot, and even advised me to learn what I could from her. The nightmares began at the beginning of the second week. I did not think much of them at first. I could barely remember them upon waking up. However, the vividness and intensity of the nightmares increased as the days passed. My aunt explained that the nightmares were caused by anxiety while starting at a new school, and that they would stop once I became comfortable at school. The first day of school came and went, but the nightmares only got worse. One night, after a particular terrifying dream, I awoke to an emaciated figure with long hair stooping over my bed. I began to call out for my aunt, trying to determine if this was another nightmare. But the figure put 2 pale fingers with black nails to my lips and whispered in shrill voice, "Servant of Mummy, it is what you shall become. Please, dear cousin, run." At that moment, Aunt Sheryl burst through the door with twisted rage written all over her face. The figure shrank into the shadows, and my aunt placed a cloth over my face, and a wave of darkness washed over me. Yeah, I get it. You guys are at home, sitting on your couch, thinking about what an idiot I am for not seeing the situation for what it was. In my defence, I will blame my youth and naivety. I will not blame my mother, though I am sure some of you might think this is her fault for trusting Aunt Sheryl. In any case, back to the story. I woke the next morning feeling groggy, confused, and dreading another night of nightmares. My aunt prepared a large Sunday breakfast for me, and excitedly told me that my cousin had been accepted to a university program for those with mental disorders. She pointed to a picture on the kitchen counter, showing a skinny boy with short, cropped jet black hair and a gap-toothed smile. "That's your cousin right there," she guessed with wide eyes. A shadow then passed over her face, and she muttered, "He was such an obedient little boy." Her voice trailed off, and she stared off into space for a moment, before I broke the silence by telling her about my dreams the previous night. Aunt Cheryl's eyes bore into me as I recounted the nightmare, and for a moment, I thought I saw the same look of uncontrollable rage I had seen in the nightmare. The moment passed, and Aunt Sheryl smiled so wide that I thought her face would rip in half. She told me that in her professional opinion, I suffered from a rare anxiety disorder. According to her, the nightmares were only the beginning. My suffering would increase unless I allowed her to begin treatment immediately. That scared the shit out of my 16-year-old self. I immediately called my mother to ask if I could come home. Aunt Sheryl hovered over me as I told my mother about the nightmares, and Aunt Cheryl's prognosis. My mother, bless her honest heart, asked to speak to Aunt Sheryl, so that she could better understand the situation. Aunt Sheryl sent me back up to my room while she spoke to my mother. An hour later, she appeared at the door with the same face-splitting smile. Aunt Sheryl said with a glint in her eye, "Your mother has agreed to give me temporary custody of you so that we can fix you once and for all." That is the moment when I should have run. I did not know it then, but I would not get another chance at freedom for days. And by then, the damage would have been done. I trusted my mother, so I trusted her. I guess that is how things usually happen. Too much trust. The next day, I got up to go to school, but found Aunt Sheryl waiting for me outside my room. She said, "No school today. I called your principal and let him know about the situation. Intensive therapy begins now. Lucky for you, I have no patience, so I can focus all my attention on you." The large, barren office contained nothing except for 2 chairs and a large chest of storage. Aunt Sheryl sat down in the large leather chair at the centre of the room and motioned for me to sit down in the much smaller metal chair across from her. She questioned me for almost 2 hours, spending most of the time asking me about my recent nightmares, as well as what I feared most in life. At the end of the session, eyes drooping from exhaustion, I asked if I would be allowed to return to school the next day. I remember her saying something about how school is no place for children with anxiety disorders, and quickly changing the subject. She rushed out of the room and quickly returned with a glass of lemonade. I downed a glass of lemonade and sealed my fate. I know now that my aunt laced this glass of lemonade with her own special blend of LSD and Xanax. Somehow, she used her psychology credentials to procure this stuff in bulk from overseas distributors. In fact, my dear aunt had been lacing my food with small amounts of various pharmaceutical concoctions since I moved in, thus causing my nightly nightmares. The large dose hidden within the lemonade hit me hard. This devil's mix of chemicals scrambled my mind, yet kept me calm and agreeable. "What is happening to me?" I stammered as I watched my aunt's face melt before my eyes. "Your auntie knows what is best for you," she crooned. "You're such a sweet boy. It would be a shame for you to grow up and have to go out into the big bad world all by yourself. I'm going to make it so you never have to grow up and can live here forever." My rapidly deteriorating mind screamed in terror, but my body refused to respond when I tried to stand. "You're not going anywhere unless I give you permission. Is that understood?" she said. I nodded slowly, dribbling drool out of the corner of my mouth. "Wait right where you are. There is someone I would like you to meet," my aunt said. She left the room, and I desperately tried to regain control of my mind and body. I looked down at my hand and willed it to move into the air. To my horror, my arm suddenly burst into flame, yet I felt no pain. I ignored the flames, knowing that the LSD had perverted my senses. Luckily, the Xanax my aunt had dosed me with kept me calm, despite the terrifying hallucinations. I rolled my body off the chair and slammed into the ground, and stared at the door which waved in and out of existence. I willed my arms and legs into action and half crawled, half rolled across the floor towards the door. If I could only reach that door, then all would be okay. Well, that is what I believed. I reached the door and slowly raised myself onto my feet, after an eternity of crawling. I reached out to open the door, but the door flung open, knocking me back onto the floor. My mind reeled in terror and confusion as I tried to make sense of the situation. My aunt said, "Oh, you have been a naughty boy. I think it's time to teach you some manners." She stepped over my twitching body and told me to crawl back to my seat. I set about following her orders with a gaunt, hellish creature stepped through the door. I saw gleaming fangs, razor-sharp claws and glowing eyes. My mind silently screamed as I willed my body to crawl towards the safety of my aunt. Only then did I look up to see what hellish creature my aunt had brought to torment me. A young man stood in place of the creature. On further inspection, I could see that this was the man that had appeared in my room the previous night. He looked at the ground, fidgeting nervously, and whispered, "Sorry, dear cousin. You did not heed my warning. Welcome to hell." The war chest in Aunt Sheryl's office contained a variety of psychoactive substances. My cousin, broken in mind and spirit, served as my aunt's assistant. At the beginning of our session, my aunt called out the name of some drug I'd never heard of, and my cousin shuffled over to the chest and sorted through the various vials, bottles, and syringes until he found what his mother had ordered. She had me hooked up to an IV bag and strapped down to the metal chair. Aunt Sheryl sat across from me as if her chair were a throne. I knew that she meant to make me the newest member of her royal court. I decided then I would do everything in my power to escape. I knew that I must hold onto my sanity so that I could seize freedom when the opportunity presented itself. She ordered my cousin to pump 13 cc's of speed directly into my IV. I struggled against my restraints and felt the metal ding into my wrists and ankles. My heart throbbed wildly as I tried to slow down my racing mind. "Oh, no, no, no," my aunt burst out. "Do not fight it, dear. You're only making it worse for yourself." My Aunt Sheryl barked out orders to my cousin, who quickly appeared at my side. He injected a clear liquid into the IV. "Let's see how you handle some psilocybin Cuban cysts injected right into your bloodstream," my aunt said. I desperately tried to make eye contact with my cousin, silently pleading with him to do something, anything, that might help me escape from this living hell. He avoided my eyes and returned to the shadows behind his mother. "Isn't he such a good boy?" my aunt asked. "He sure knows how to make his mummy proud. He's not like his filthy father and good-for-nothing brother." My mind began to warp as the hallucinogenic slowly began to take effect. My aunt walked over to the chest and pulled out a plastic box. She walked over to my chair, opening the box, and said, "Take a look at what I have for you." A box contained dozens of disgusting spiders and scorpions. I could see my contorted face reflected in 1,000 little black eyes looking up at me. My aunt, with a smile stretching ear to ear, told me that I had a simple choice to make. She said, "I want you to burn the home of your good-for-nothing mother to the ground. If you refuse, then you spend the night locked in my war chest with the spiders and scorpions." Red-hot anger flashed through my mind as I lunged against my restraints. I see. Suit yourself then," my aunt said. She ordered my cousin to lock me in the chest for the night and left the room. He dragged my chair to the chest and emptied the chest of its contents. I looked down into the empty chest. I knew that I had no escape now, if I wanted to hold on to my sanity. A night spent locked in a chest with spiders and scorpions would drive anyone mad. Having to endure that while on psychoactive substances would shred a person's mind to bits. I knew how to focus my anger so that the fear would not overwhelm me. I searched the spilled contents of the chest for something I could use as a weapon, while my cousin fumbled with the keys to my restraints. I forced a doubt from my mind, while feigning terror and confusion. My cousin unlocked my ankles and quickly stepped back to safety. I allowed my head to roll to its side and murmured nonsense. My cousin stepped towards me with renewed confidence and began to unlock the last of my restraints. I let my body fall forward to the ground and wrapped my right hand around what looked like a small ice pick. I felt my cousin's foot nudge my side, yet I remained lying on the ground. He kicked my side, and still I did nothing. He sighed and bent over to pick my body up. I sprung off the ground, twisting my body around and driving the ice pick into my cousin's chest with all the force I could muster. My cousin, blood dribbling from his mouth, fell down to his knees. She looked up at me and whispered, "She made me kill my father and brother. I'm so sorry." He slumped back against the wall and said, "Kill her, please." I turned from my cousin and started towards the door. Fuck that, I thought to myself. I'm not going to creep around the house while tripping on mushrooms in some desperate attempt to get revenge on my aunt. I needed to get out of that godforsaken house as soon as possible. I knew I had to get out fast, before the speed wore off. The speed was the only reason my mind focused on keeping the hallucinations at bay. The effects of the psychobin intensified, minute by minute, as I desperately tried to remember the quickest route from the front door. Shadows, spiders, and scorpions danced in front of my eyes, and I thought I could hear my cousin shuffling somewhere behind me. I kept my terror in check and quickened my pace. I rounded the final corner and found my Aunt Sheryl waiting. I screamed and jammed the ice pick into her face and found myself caught in her arms. We fell to the floor and I heard a door slam upstairs. I realised that I had been fighting with the coat rack near the door and hurried to untangle myself. My aunt appeared at the top of the staircase and screamed, "I'm going to make you beg for death, you filthy child." I rushed towards the door and to my horror discovered I needed a key for the double-cylinder deadbolt. My aunt giggled behind me and said, "Go crawl into the chest and we can pretend this never happened. You only have to sleep with a few spiders tonight." In her hand, she held what looked like a stun gun. I looked around and realised that I had lost my ice pick while struggling with the coat rack. "There is no escape," she purred as she inched closer. She raised the stun gun and prepared to charge. "I'm going to skin you alive," she said. I rushed towards her and felt the barbs of the stun gun bite into my flesh. My body jerked and fell heavily to the ground as current pulsed through my muscles. I looked up at my aunt in defeat, knowing that I had lost. My aunt took a step towards me and then froze. She stumbled towards the wall with her arms outstretched in an attempt to steady herself. My cousin emerged from the shadows with a blooded kitchen knife in hand. He smiled at me and bent down to remove the barbs of the stun gun from my skin. I tried to stand, but my legs could not hold my weight. My cousin picked up a cherry red container and began dousing himself and my aunt with the liquid. I cried out as the smell of gasoline burned my nostrils. My cousin, the lighter in hand, turned to stare at me. He quickly closed the lighter and produced the key, which he then threw onto my lap. I burst out of the house and turned around in time to see my cousin touch the lighter to his gasoline-soaked clothing. Engulfed in flames, he stumbled towards my screaming aunt and tightly embraced her. Her shrill screams and his maniacal laughter will be etched into my mind forever. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time, guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.